here's where it gets really interesting, acid-base imbalances. So the learning objectives for this part are to be able to explain how the different types of acidosis and alkalosis develop and their effects on the body. So lots of different things going on here. And you're working in the hospital, you're never going to see someone admitted with a diagnosis of metabolic acidosis or respiratory acidosis. It's going to be the cause of that they get admitted for. So they're going to get admitted for a drug overdose, which causes respiratory acidosis. They're going to get admitted for COPD exacerbation, which causes respiratory acidosis. They're going to get admitted for renal failure, which causes metabolic acidosis or alkalosis. They're going to get admitted for intractable vomiting, which causes alkalosis and acidosis. So they're usually secondary to another cause. So let's just talk about it first and we'll get there. So acid-base balance is essential to homeostasis. Our cell enzymes that mediate the cellular reactions that we need for our metabolism only function within a narrow pH range, really narrow. The normal serum pH range is 7.35 to 7.45, really small. You will die if your serum pH is below 6.8 or above 7.8. So that's not a lot of margin for error. That's just not good. So this is our normal range, acidosis, alkalosis. So if you have increased hydrogen ions in your system, that's acidosis. If you have decreased hydrogen ions in your system, that's alkalosis. The normal range, very narrow, between 7.35 and 7.45. 7.4 is considered neutral. And death occurs very shortly on either side of that very small range. So when the serum pH is less than 7.4, more hydrogen ions are present. And that's a condition of acidosis. Whether it's dangerous is how low. How much buildup of hydrogen ions are there? If the serum pH is greater than 7.4, it's more basic or alkaline. And that indicates alkalosis or the presence of fewer hydrogen ions. So the body normally has a slight tendency towards acidosis or lower pH because cellular metabolism is constantly producing carbon dioxide. Remember, cellular metabolism, we're burning hydrocarbons and oxygen with the byproducts of water and carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, when it's dissolved in fluid, which blood is fluid, it exists as carbonic acid. So there are other non-volatile metabolic acids, such as lactic acid, keto acids, sulfates, phosphates. Lactic acid results from anaerobic metabolism of glucose. Keto acids result from incomplete oxidation of fatty acids, and protein metabolism may produce sulfates or phosphates. So lots of different things that are kind of leaning us towards the acidosis range or the more acidic range. So because this is such a critical system to keep balanced, there are 4 different systems in the body, 4 backup systems to keep this in the right range. So when you have that many backup systems to make sure something's working, you know that that's something that's pretty important. So the metabolism is regulated by the endocrine and the nervous systems. Everything is regulated by the endocrine and the nervous systems. The metabolic rate can be influenced by body temperature, exercise, hormone activity, and digestion. If our acid-base balance gets messed up, or our fluid balance gets messed up, it can alter metabolic function and can cause signs and symptoms, manifestations in the body, clinical manifestations of disease. Most medical interventions for acid-base imbalance involve managing the underlying cause. correcting the coexisting electrolyte imbalances and administering potassium chloride to the patient. So, like I said, you never see anybody admitted to the hospital with the diagnosis of metabolic acidosis. You're going to see them admitted to the hospital with the diagnosis of intractable vomiting or renal failure, or whatever the thing causing their metabolic acidosis is. So the really the metabolic processes that the cells need to go through need that particular range of acid-base balance in order to function. So there are three mechanisms that control the acid-base balance in the body. One of them is chemical buffers. So a buffer has an acidic component and a basic component, and whatever you need, it provides what you don't have. So if you're acidic, it provides bases. If you're alkalotic or basic, it provides acids. So so there's three different buffer systems in the body that help maintain serum pH, which is amazing, really. So the buffer systems circulate in the blood and they respond to pH imbalances immediately. So they're like the quick fix, the Band-Aid. Get it on there, get it in range. The respiratory system can alter carbon dioxide levels in the body by changing their respiratory rate. So when we breathe out CO2, it alters our carbonic acid level in the blood, and it makes us less acidic. So people that have diseases like chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, where they have trouble exhaling, live in a state of respiratory acidosis because they can't exhale enough CO2 to get it out of our system. The kidneys can modify the excretion rate of acids and the production and absorption of bicarbonate ions, and that has a longer acting effect. So the kidneys are the slowest to respond, but the longest acting effect, if that makes any sense. So here's our little graphic from the book. So the cellular metabolism produces acids. So in the blood, we have CO2 and H2O, and they combine to form carbonic acid. The hydrogen binds to bicarbonate ion in a buffer. So carbonic acid breaks up into hydrogen and bicarbonate ion when it's dissolved. So if you have enough of them that they're balanced, then you're at pH 7.4. If you have more hydrogen ions and not enough bicarbonate ions, then you're acidic. If you have too many bicarbonate ions and not enough hydrogen ions, then you're alkalotic. If you have extra hydrogen, the kidneys can produce more bicarbonate to absorb the extra amount of hydrogen, if that makes sense. So that's part of what the kidneys do. There's a buffer. The buffer systems in the blood can adjust the amount of hydrogen ions that are free or not free. So the two buffer systems that really has four major buffer pairs: sodium bicarbonate, carbonic acid, the phosphate system, the hemoglobin system, and the protein system. So there's so many. The acids in the blood can also go to the lungs, where they're broken apart into CO2 and water and exhaled. CO2 is exhaled. So then that decreases your acidity, basically. So lots of crazy stuff is going on, which I think is amazing that all this stuff is going on. So the bicarbonate system is the major extracellular fluid buffer, and a lot of times taking bicarbonate levels is the way that they clinically assess the patient's acid-base status. So I'm going to talk a little bit at the end of the lecture on specific laboratory values or what the ranges are. And we're going to look at a case study where we see what's out of range and whether it's respiratory or metabolic acidosis. But we're not going to look too closely on that. The type of questions that I've seen on board exam, practice exams, they tell you what the person's pH is. And so that tells you right away if they're acidosis or alkalosis. And then you have to decide whether it's respiratory or metabolic. And I have a little mnemonic system for you to remember how to do that, which is kind of cool. So there's the bicarbonate buffer system is carbonic acid, which is a combination of carbon dioxide with water as a result of cellular metabolism. So bicarbonate ion is the base and carbonic acid is the acid, and it's controlled by the respiratory system in the kidneys, control how much there is of each of those components in there. So I don't know, I'm not going to go into really much more detail than that. But so the buffer pairs in the blood respond to pH changes immediately. The respiratory system can alter carbonic acid levels to change pH by breathing out more CO2 or not breathing out as much CO2. The kidneys can modify the excretion rate of acids and absorption of bicarbonate to regulate pH. So kidneys are the most significant control mechanism, but the slowest. So remember that. Remember that if it shows up on a test question, what's the most significant and slowest control mechanism for the regulation of pH? It's the kidneys. So just so you know, if you ever see that on an exam, that's the answer. It's the kidneys. So that's another reason why you need your kidneys, because kidneys are the key to everything. Kidneys are so important that we have 2 of them, and you can live with only 1. So you could donate your kidney to somebody. But kidneys are super, super important. They're the most significant pH control mechanism. The buffer system, so sodium bicarbonate carbonic acid is the major extracellular fluid buffer, and it's controlled by the respiratory system in the kidneys. Other buffering systems, phosphate, hemoglobin, and protein. Okay. So that's all we're going to say about that. So the types of acid-base imbalances, we have respiratory or metabolic and acidosis or alkalosis, okay? So respiratory acidosis is caused by an increase in carbon dioxide levels from whatever reason causes it. That causes respiratory acidosis. Metabolic acidosis is a decrease in bicarbonate ions from whatever reason is causing that. Respiratory alkalosis is a decrease in carbon dioxide levels, and metabolic alkalosis is a loss of hydrogen ions through the kidneys and GI tract. So when we look at, and we'll look at this in a couple different ways, and we'll look at it in a case study, so it hopefully will make sense. But when you're in respiratory acidosis, if you're in acidosis, your pH is low, your pH is down, and your carbon dioxide is up. So when they're opposite, it's respiratory. So respiratory opposite. And bicarbonate ion is normal for respiratory. In metabolic acidosis, the pH is down and the bicarbonate is down. So they're the same. In metabolic alkalosis, pH is up, so bicarbonate is up. They're the same, and CO2 is normal. So the acronym to remember this is respiratory opposite, metabolic equal. So I don't know, I think the equal is a little bit of a stretch, but metabolic in the same way. So if the indicators are opposite and it's the CO2 that's the problem and the pH is down, it's respiratory acidosis. If the CO2 is down and the pH is up, it's respiratory alkalosis. If the pH is down and the bicarbonate is down, it's metabolic acidosis. If they're both up, it's metabolic alkalosis. So we'll go over that in the form of a case study, and we'll review it again in a different way, just so that I'm just planting the seeds here. So our compensation mechanisms for pH imbalance are usually limited. They're usually short term because it doesn't remove the cause of the imbalance. It just kind of fixes the problem temporarily. The compensation occurs to balance the relative proportion of hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions in circulation. So using the buffers in the blood, changes in respiration or changes in renal function. Those are our mechanisms. If those mechanisms don't work, it's called decompensation. And the things that can cause decompensation are when the causative problem becomes more severe. So you're in chronic renal failure and it turns into acute renal failure. That could cause decompensation. Additional problems occur. So there's something else causing problems, like any kind of disease processes. Or the compensation mechanisms are exceeded for what they can do, or they fail. If you have decompensated acidosis or alkalosis, it requires medical intervention to maintain homeostasis, otherwise known as staying alive. So it's a life-threatening thing. If you have decompensated alkalosis or acidosis, you have to go to the emergency room. So we'll talk about the symptoms in the next section.